On today's show, the Locked On Cavs Whiparound is back. The season is here, and the Cavs this week open up with games in New York against the Knicks, in Brooklyn against the Nets, and at home against the Milwaukee Bucks for their home opener on Sunday. We're going to talk about all three of those opponents as we get ready for the season on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers at my Substack, The Inside Shot. Thank you for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen, and thank you to those of you that make Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day, even if this episode in particular might actually be your second listen of Locked On Cavs today. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Please make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. And while you're watching this video, hit that thumbs up button for us and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Thrilled, as always, to bring the Whiparound episode back. You know the drill if you're a longtime subscriber. If you're new to the show, this is what we're going to do every single week of the season. We are going to take a secondary episode. So you had the normal edition of Locked On Cavs already this morning. This is a bonus episode today, and we are going to talk about the teams that the Cavs play. We're going to get a little bit more specific this episode, far less about the Cavs, far more about what the Cavs are going to see this week. So Gavin Schall going to drop by first. We're going to talk about the New York Knicks, vibes around Mike Brown in his first season with the team, as that season opening game is set for Wednesday night at Madison Square Garden. Erik Slater makes his Locked On Cavs debut. He covers the Brooklyn Nets for us here at the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as Clutch Points. We talk about all it feels like 100 rookies that they have on the roster this year. And then finally, Camille Davis going to stop by, talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo, the summer that was, what to expect out of the Milwaukee Bucks this season, and whether or not that's a Bucks team that she thinks can be a contender. So that is all straight ahead on today's episode of Locked On Cavs. And first off, here is Gavin Schall. The Cavaliers, of course, will open the season in New York on Wednesday night against the Knicks, and there's nobody we would rather talk about the New York Knicks with than Gavin Schall, who does a great job over at Locked On Knicks, and it's been a while since we have talked. I think it's been like 6 or 8 weeks, which is, kind of a long time for us. But Gavin, very excited to get the season underway, very excited to get it underway in New York. And how are the vibes coming out of the New York Knicks training camp heading into this season?
Mostly fantastic. Mike Brown has done everything he said he was going to do in terms of elevating the team's pace. There's just a lot more off-ball action than the Knicks have ever had in the past. The ball movement has been really good. There are times where it still seems a little bit too fast for guys, and there are small little bits of growing pains, but they're doing, who knows if I was right, but they're doing everything I wanted them to do. And the comp I keep making, Danny, which is why I'm happy we're having this conversation, is the Cleveland Cavaliers and going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson. I don't know if it will have exactly the same galvanizing effect in terms of unlocking this just incredible, all-time regular season offense and guys being able to play minimal minutes because they're in so many blowouts, but it does feel somewhat similar. Only small fly in the ointment was Malcolm Brogdon retiring. That was certainly not part of the plan for the Knicks front office. I think the expectation was he was going to be a pretty key part of their rotation, and they were willing to trade away one of Pacom Dadier or Tyler Kolek to make that happen. They didn't have to do that because Malcolm Brogdon retired, so they're going to have to figure that out. Yeah,
that was maybe it didn't catch you by surprise. It caught me by surprise.
I was surprised. I think the Knicks were surprised.
What happened?
They had every intention of him being on the roster.
Do you have any idea what happened there? What led to that? Because I thought when they signed him, and it was a later signing, but I thought, oh, this is a very nice move for the Knicks. He will be a good, if Mike Brown is serious about being anti-Thibs and, actually playing a lot of guys as opposed to playing 6 guys every night. Malcolm Brogdon will do a lot of good things for them. And then for him to just say, you know what, actually, never mind. I was taken aback by that.
Yeah, just his combination of traits, like his size, his IQ, just like a true, because Jordan Clarkson, obviously, from the Cavs is going to be very shoot first, just having a true backup point guard that also has the ability to get to the rim, to create shots for others, an elite catch and shoot 3-point shooter, were all things the Knicks needed. And there was nothing crazy there. It just seemed like he's a guy obviously who's dealt with a ton of injuries throughout his career. He was not moving exceptionally well this preseason, coming off, I believe it was an ankle injury that ended his season with the Wizards. I thought he was good enough. I thought he was still going to be a key piece of the rotation, but I guess he ultimately felt like he wasn't sure if he was going to make it through the season. And he knew to be on the roster, the Knicks would have to trade away two guys they really liked. They took in the 2024 draft, as I mentioned, in Kolek, in Dadier. One of them was going to have to go to ensure both him and Landry Shamet could be on the final roster. I think if he felt like, if I'm not all in, I don't want to make the Knicks trade away one of those guys. I don't want to mess with either of their lives. I'm just going to bow out now.
Well, that's certainly noble of him, if nothing else. And you mentioned something too in your first answer about pace, which I don't know if you know this, but every team, like all 30 teams, talk about pace in training camp. It is the most common talking point in NBA training camp. In fact, I can promise you later in this episode, when Camille Davis joins to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, who the Cavs play on Sunday night, we will talk about pace. And the Knicks want to play faster, as most teams say they want to in training camp. But why do you believe they will hold true to that? Like, why do you think they will hold up that end of the bargain?
So it's interesting. I didn't check after their last game, but the Knicks were actually near the bottom of the league in pace in the preseason. And I'm like, am I crazy? Am I seeing things? And part of that is it looked really good against the Philadelphia 76ers. And then they played a real team in the Minnesota Timberwolves. They played a not so real team, but without their real players in the Washington Wizards. And they weren't getting out as much. Like against the Sixers in Abu Dhabi, they were obviously missing 3 of their 5 starters. So you question how much to take away from those games. Like Jalen Brunson was constantly leaking out. It looked like a rec league game, Danny, that you and I would be in, where the other team scores a point guard. It's like, all right, I'm just sprinting down the court as fast as I can. Throw me a Hail Mary. I'm going to try to get a layup every time down. And to me, that part of it is a little bit less real. Like I still don't think the Knicks will be playing in transition all the time, just because that's not really their personnel. That suits OG Anunoby, that suits Josh Hart. It does suit Karl Anthony Towns, just because he's such an elite trail 3-point shooter and it's such a struggle to get him threes. And that's one area it's a little bit easier. Where I do think it's real and I do think it matters is their pace in the half court and just how quickly guys are getting off the ball. And it's not, I know this last game they leaned into that a little bit more, but it's not just watch Jalen Brunson dribble for 18 seconds, cook 3 guys and hit a crazy fadeaway jumper. That'll still be there. That'll definitely be there in abundance in crunch time. But I think throughout the game, they're trying to do more to run him through more off-ball actions, either as the target or as a decoy. Like when he gets stopped, it's not play over like it was last year. He's screening away. He's setting up OG Anunoby to cut to the basket, take on a defender. That I think is going to remain. They're playing through the bigs a lot more. It's a lot of dribble handoffs. It's a lot of bring it up, pass it ahead, sprint, get it, attack the rim. And that won't even always result in quicker shots, but I think it will result in better shots where you're moving a defense, you're exploiting an advantage, and you're pressing it with your ball movement versus with your individual talent.
I'm not sure there's a faker number than preseason pace. Like last year, the Cavs in the preseason were second in pace with, by the NBA's metric, 108 possessions per game. That's just not a real thing. No one does that in the NBA. There would have been 5 possessions faster than anybody in the regular season. So I think that is kind of the one thing that I always look at and take with a grain of salt. But Mike Brown in as head coach, somebody that a lot of Cavs fans are obviously very familiar with because he had not 1, but 2 tours of duty coaching this team. And last year you mentioned the Knicks trying to take a little something from the Cavs in terms of changing coaches, and the Cavs made this big jump in terms of regular season success, but there will be at some point some sort of adjustment. And I don't expect the Knicks to start 15-0 the way the Cavs did last year, because basically nobody ever starts 15-0. That's not a reasonable thing. What do you expect the adjustment period to be like as the Knicks get used to Mike Brown in the regular season?
Yeah, and I think, the other thing you got to note there is they're also getting used to a brand new starting lineup, right? With Mitchell Robinson out there, at least that's the expectation. Josh Hart has been hurt for the bulk of the preseason, but he didn't start game 1, which is the best indicator that we have that Mitch will be in that opening night starting lineup. And I know I've told the stat to you to the point that, like, I think your listeners probably know it at this point, but the Knicks starting lineup played 500 more possessions, right, than any other lineup in the league. And I think the combination of this offense, and in particular asking Mitchell Robinson to do a lot of stuff he's never done in his career and play almost more so how Tom Thibodeau would use Isaiah Hartenstein, like be a dribble handoff hub, hit backdoor cutters, right? Like running off like a little rub screen. It's going to be really fascinating to see how they handle that. I think there are going to be some issues just asking Mitch fairly late in his career as a guy who's just an extraordinary athlete, very smart defender, but very limited with the ball in his hands to do a bit more. Asking Karl Anthony Towns at times to play something like a wing, which obviously he did some of in Minnesota, but I do think there will be moments of brilliance and there will be major growing pains. I think overall, though, they're going to be in a better place than they were to start last season, just because this offense feels very inclusive, and it's so crucial to keep OG Anunoby engaged, to keep Mikal Bridges, who just had the worst body language in the league last year, now looks like a kid going to Disney World for the first time. He's having a blast. His shot looks a lot better. Just guys feeling a little happier, a little bit more confident, and I'm so fascinated by this first game, because I want to just see what the vibes are. Like, Danny, you know as well as I do, the Knicks got their butts kicked against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the regular season. They got their butts kicked by the Boston Celtics in the regular season. Does the confidence of this new system, and even more so, like actually beating Boston and making the Eastern Conference Finals last year, translate? And do they, at the very least, give Cleveland a great game or come out and have like a win? Like, to me, this game means so much more to the Knicks in some ways than the Cavs, just because of the way Cleveland had their number last season.
I think that this game means a lot more to New York than it does the Cavs. And like, it's one thing because, as you mentioned, the Knicks had more postseason success than the Cavs. They made it to the conference finals. They were much closer to getting to the finals than the Cavs were. But also the Cavs can look at them and say, we beat you 4 times last year. And also Darius Garland not playing in this game, Max Strus not playing in this game. Like, the Cavs are going to be of the mindset that they'll, we might see this team in the conference finals, but we should, or at least hopefully, look much different than we do on opening night. So I'll get you out of here with this, because we've talked a lot about how the offense is going to change and how things will look different. And you brought up the vibes and how, Mikal Bridges in particular looks like the happiest guy in the world. I'm curious, from your perspective, which individual player, could be a young guy, could be a veteran, do you expect to make the biggest individual jump from last year to this year on the Knicks?
I think it is probably Mikal. He just had such a weird, tough season. And to his credit, like, you look at the numbers and they weren't a stark departure from his career norms, but he came into the season and he had this very strange quote that he's just been an excellent 3-point shooter throughout his career, but that he's been messing with his shot since he left Villanova and trying to get back to how he shot in college, which was strange. And his shot looked broken in the early portion of the season, this weird hitch where he would just hold it on top of his head for an extra second, lose all the momentum he built up with his dip, with his mechanics, and then it would clank off front iron. And because of that, even though he sort of figured out as the year went, he basically never shot above the break threes, which is just incredibly valuable real estate for, obviously, for any NBA team, but for the Knicks in particular, just with the way their spacing works. And he looks very confident taking that shot this preseason. The other thing, there was just a distinct lack of like activity level and physicality, and he generally just did not seem very happy with life under Tom Thibodeau, where he was covering more miles than anyone in the NBA, but did not really have a lot of time on the ball. And it feels like Mike Brown is empowering him more in a couple of different ways. And in turn, you're getting all these plays where you see flashes of the guy that the Knicks thought was the final piece to their championship puzzle, that they thought was worth giving up 5 first-round picks for, and he's getting to passing lanes, knocking the ball up the court. He's crashing like from behind the arc to rebound a free throw, right? Like small little things, but just these extra effort plays and moments that defined him as a player and made him one of the most valuable non-all-stars in the NBA that the Knicks just didn't get last year, and I think desperately, desperately missed, because if him and OG Anunoby are not both operating at 110% of their potential on the defensive end of the floor, this team is just going to have real issues covering up both Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. Mike Brown, I talked about some of the offensive shifts defensively, is leading into like a very heavy gap help scheme that when Mikal's off the ball, him and OG, I think as good as any two defenders in the NBA in that kind of setting, just like prodding and trying to poke at the ball, when ball handlers get near the elbows. If he's engaged, if he's locked in on both ends, it just makes the Knicks a very different team. And if preseason's any indication, that's what they're going to get from Mikal this year.
Well, it'll be a fascinating thing to watch, and Wednesday night, of course, will be a big game, even if these two teams might look different when they meet again at Christmas, and even more different if they do meet in the postseason. Gavin, you do a great job over at Locked On Knicks. If you want more Knicks coverage, that is the place to go. Thank you so much for the time, man.
Thanks for having me, man. Fun always.
Going to get to my conversation with Erik Slater coming up in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Built. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in, because Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards that you can actually use. When you pay your rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and so much more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. With Built, your rent finally works for you because you're earning points every month on something that you already have to pay. Whether you're grabbing food at your local restaurant or heading to the gym, you can also earn rewards with Built. Built has made everyday life feel more rewarding from your neighborhood to your travel plans. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That is joinbilt.com/lockedonnba. Again, joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba, and make sure to use that link so they know that we sent you. Today's show is also brought to you by Skims. Yes, Skims. If you listen to the show, you know that I am a big fan of Skims for Men, because when I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued, maybe a little confused, thought, this is a company I thought was only for women. No, I was wrong there, because Skims for Men is actually legitimately the best underwear that I've ever worn. And the quality is second to none. I've worn the same style of underwear practically my entire life, but I've cycled through a lot of different brands, and I've always been searching for the best brand. And then when Skims showed up at my door, I found it. I realized I never want to go back. I just want to only wear Skims for Men. It is the best underwear I've ever had. And one of the things that I love about it is it keeps its shape, right? Like, we've all had the underwear that bunches up on the hips and it gets incredibly uncomfortable. You're trying to fix it without people noticing, and you have to go to the bathroom because you have to fix your underwear. And that's not a fun thing to do. That doesn't happen with Skims. It's going to keep its shape. It's going to be the best underwear that you've ever worn as well. It is my favorite, and it can be your favorite as well. So what you need to do, if you want to make that happen, you need to head to skims.com to shop Skims Men. That is skims.com, and let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That is skims.com. You won't regret it. It's my favorite underwear, and it certainly could be your favorite underwear too. And making his Locked On Cavs debut is Erik Slater, who is the new Locked On Nets host, doing a great job so far covering the Brooklyn Nets, a team that not expected to go very far this year. They have one of the lowest win totals over with our friends at FanDuel. Erik, training camp is over. The regular season is just about here. Not much in terms of expectations for the Nets, but how are the vibes so far in Brooklyn this year?
I would say the vibes are that of excitement. This is a team that last year was obviously kind of mired in a tanking campaign, but there really wasn't a ton to look forward to in terms of the future other than the draft pick that they had coming up. And that didn't even end up the way they'd hoped. But this year, you have these 5 rookie first-round picks and the first lottery pick that this team has had in 15 years. As crazy as that is for
that sounds insane.
I know, for how bad they've, all the bad seasons that they've had, they haven't seen any fruit from all of that. So they have Igor Dioma, and they have these other guys that they are excited about. So while it is another tanking campaign, I think everybody knows that, you at least have the development of these young guys to look towards and kind of monitor throughout the season. So I think there's excitement about that. And then in addition to that, you do have another high pick, coming up, hopefully, where they hope to end up higher than they did this past draft, in a draft where there's 3 prospects atop that, draft analysts are very, very excited about. So I'd say it's an overall vibe of just excitement of kind of this rebuild picking up some steam.
Yes, I think we all saw Joe Tsai, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets. I think we all saw his comments about, well, we're hoping to have a very good draft pick in this upcoming draft, and the Nets only have their own first-round pick, if I'm not mistaken, in this draft, as opposed to having 5 first-round draft picks this past spring or early summer, whenever the NBA draft actually does happen. So I do think it will be a season that is not filled with a lot of wins in Brooklyn. That total, as I mentioned, is set on FanDuel at 19.5. And that is obviously a very low number, but I look at this Nets roster, which has a lot of young, unproven players that you don't know what to expect. But I do look at this and say, well, if nothing else, I do think Jordi Fernandez can coach. What are expectations for him going into year 2 in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I expect him to have, a impact on winning as he did this past season. I think the Nets were a little spooked by how many games that he was able to win early last season. And I think that they've taken steps this summer, I think, to maybe somewhat handicap him in terms of he has 3 rookies at point guard. Whereas last season, if you look at them starting 9 and 10 and exceeding expectations, in my opinion, the biggest driving factor behind that was the play of Dennis Schroeder, who was playing at a near all-star level for around 23 games before they traded him. So quickest way to handicap a roster in terms of their ability to compete, I think, is taking away their capable ball handlers. And the Nets enter this campaign with 3 rookies manning the point guard responsibility. So I think Jordy will still have an impact. I think he'll still get this team to buy in and punch above their weight. I think he's great in terms of being a motivational guy in addition to an X's and O's guy. But I think it might be a little more difficult for him because we've seen, like we saw in their last preseason game, like Yegor Dioman looked good, but, Ben Surratt, Nolan Troy really struggled handling the Raptors' ball pressure. And even Yegor, he looked good, but he has a ways to go in terms of a ball handler and being a guy who can drive offense. So I think they're going to have some struggles there, but I would not at all be shocked if they compete in a bunch of games that people think they have no business competing in just based off what Jordy's able to do.
3 rookie point guards trying to run an offense doesn't often go well. I mean, 1 rookie point guard trying to run an offense really doesn't go well in the NBA. 5 first-round draft picks this past summer in the NBA draft. It is, incredibly unfair to judge any of these guys before they have played a single regular season NBA game. Even then, it'll be unfair maybe to judge them a little bit after what this first season in Brooklyn is like. But so far, Erik, what are the early returns on the 2025 draft class for the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, I think some of them have battled injuries this offseason, like Drake Powell had a knee issue, Yegor Dioman had a foot issue. So both of those guys missed time to start training camp. The story entering training camp and early in the preseason was Ben Surratt, who I had heard from everybody looked really good and was kind of exceeding expectations for what the Nets had set for him or what a lot of the players had thought. So he looked really good. He's outplayed Nolan Troy thus far, and I think he solidified himself as the backup point guard there. I also think Danny Wolf has shown some really encouraging things in the preseason in terms of having some NBA-ready skills that play at the next level in terms of his ball handling, his floor spacing, his court vision, all of those things that he can do as a 6'11" big man. And then, Yegor Dioman comes in this last preseason game. He hasn't played since Summer League, and he looked pretty comfortable and pretty impactful off the bat. He had like 14 points in 19 minutes. He didn't turn the ball over a ton, had a couple of turnovers, but handled Scotty Barnes and a lot of these Raptors defenders pressuring him up the floor, which was nice to see. And then you also have Drake Powell, who's a really athletic wing, but I think it's going to take some time to develop. So I think the expectation early on is that Powell, Troy, probably Danny Wolf too, spend time in the G League early in the season. And then Dioman and Surratt are probably going to split the ball handling responsibilities and the point guard responsibilities. And I do think that there's a lot of excitement about the class as a whole, but I think Surratt and Yegor look like they could be ready to not make a high-level impact, but at least look comfortable in some of these games. And then there will be some growing pains, but I think the Nets are encouraged by what they've seen early on.
You mentioned the fast start they got off to last year. They started 9-10. I remember them coming to Cleveland in a game that they lost, but they gave the Cavs, who at that point were undefeated. I think they were 9-0. It might have been their 10th straight win, but they gave the Cavs a game that I don't think people expected them to give the Cavs. And Dennis Schroeder was certainly behind a lot of that. And they traded away a couple of other veterans throughout the year too. Like D'Angelo Russell comes to mind as a guy who started in Brooklyn, didn't necessarily end the season there. Do you expect that to be the case again this year? Like, are there veterans on this team that you look at and say, yes, you're here in Brooklyn right now, but you're probably going to be somewhere else when the season ends?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that it's not a foregone conclusion that any of these guys get traded, but I definitely think that anybody who's not a core young piece is going to be on the trade block for the right price. And I think that there's a few guys that you can look to right away, like Haywood Highsmith is a guy that they acquired in a salary dump from the Heat. He's going to be sidelined for another 2 months by an injury, but if he gets back in the lineup, I think he'll be a trade candidate. Guys who were on the roster last year, like Cam Thomas, we all know how the negotiations kind of fizzled out there with the Nets and him. There was a pretty sizable gap between those two sides in negotiations. He has a no trade clause, but if he comes out as Schroeder did last year and he comes out and he's firing on all cylinders and he's helping them compete and win some games that maybe they shouldn't, I could see that being a situation similar to Schroeder where that December 15th date comes around. Maybe the Nets are like, we're not going to re-sign this guy. He's helping us kind of win some games that maybe we shouldn't. We should get him out of there. Obviously, they'd have to negotiate that with his camp to find the destination that he deemed desirable with that no trade clause. And then other guys like Nick Claxton, the Nets have Day'Ron Sharpe behind him. He's a very capable backup big, maybe could be more. You probably want to see an expanded, workload for him to determine what he's going to be. And then they just drafted Danny Wolf. You have him behind him. He's a rookie, but he's 21 years old. He's older than these other rookies. So you probably want to get him minutes and see what he is. And he looks like he has some NBA-ready skills right now. So those are the guys I would be looking at. And then obviously beyond that, you have the guys who are the salary dumps like Terrence Mann and Michael Porter Jr. Is there a chance that those guys play really well and the Nets can flip them? definitely not out of the question, but those guys obviously have contracts that are perceived to be negative value as they were just salary dumped by their last team. So I'd probably be looking more towards those guys like Highsmith, Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton, but you have those other veterans who I also think, could be trade candidates if they perform well out of the gate.
All right, Erik, I'll get you out of here with this one. This year would be a successful season for the Brooklyn Nets if, and then on the other side, this season would not be a successful season for the Brooklyn Nets if.
This will be a successful season for the Brooklyn Nets if their rookies show development, show NBA traits that play at this level, and they're able to secure top 3 lottery odds and give themselves a good chance at a top pick in a draft that perceivably has a top 3 that draft analysts view even stronger than this past year's class, which was obviously highly touted. A not successful season would be these rookies look completely overwhelmed. They don't show the traits that they are perceived to be strong NBA traits entering the draft, don't look like they play at the next level. They don't show improvement throughout the year. And the Nets also, maybe these veterans play really well and they win a few more games and they end out outside of the top 3 in lottery odds. You would think the rookies don't play. If the rookies look that disastrous, they're probably going to get a higher in those draft lottery standings. So those things kind of should work in conjunction. But the development of these young guys and then the draft positioning are going to be the main focuses. And if those two things look, encouraging at the end of the season, I think it will constitute a success for this Nets team.
Well, if you're looking for more info on the Brooklyn Nets, Erik Slater is your guy to go to. Host of the Locked On Nets podcast. Also, check him out over at Clutch Points as well. He does a great job covering the team in both spots. Erik, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me.
Camille Davis set to join the show in just a minute, but first, today's episode brought to you by Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. You can say yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with a high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same number and contacts. That can be a gigantic hassle. That is not going to be a problem with Mint. You're getting the same quality service that you've had before, but for a fraction of the price. And the setup is super easy because, like I said, you can keep your number and you're up and running within minutes. There's no hassle. There's no headaches. There's no BS with Mint Mobile. So if you're ready to say yes to saying no, make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Again, that is mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. And welcome back to the Locked On Cavs Whiparound to Camille Davis, who does an excellent job for us here covering the Bucks over at, you guessed it, Locked On Bucks. And Camille, you and I had this conversation at a very similar time last year. I think it was week 2 or week 3 of the season. The Bucks were 2-8. The vibes were bad. Doc Rivers had to come out and say, guys, relax. We're going to make the playoffs. Everything's going to be okay. They end up going out and winning 48 games. So they were actually a pretty solid team after what was a horrific start. But I say all this to ask, how are the vibes this time this year?
The vibes are pretty decent, given the fact that it's been a summer of noise around the Milwaukee Bucks with all of the conversation around the future of Giannis Antetokounmpo and what he plans to do. Him coming, into media day and kind of saying, like, I don't remember this meeting that our governor is talking about, raised some flash. But then when you heard him again mention the fact that, in the offseason, it's kind of like being, in a relationship without your wedding ring on. Teams they're going to flirt with you, and you got to look at that attention. But once the season starts, all that's behind me and I'm ready to lock in. And he committed, like saying, hey, I'm a Milwaukee Buck. Now, if in 6-7 months, that's different, you can't hold me for that. And the first thing I did was check my calendar, like, what's 6-7 months away? Like, please don't be February. Luckily, it wasn't. He's talking more so in the offseason. So vibes are pretty good right now, knowing that Giannis is on board for this season at the very least. But I think there's also some pressure around this team right now, knowing that they have to be competitive this year to make sure they keep Giannis interested in wanting to be here.
How do you expect the Giannis situation to play out over the course of the year? And I'm not saying, like, is he going to be traded in February? Because I think that is far too complicated of a thing to happen during the season. Like, he's in Milwaukee now, and he's going to be in Milwaukee, as he said, for the rest of the season. But I have seen and been around situations where it is evident that a big name player, one of the best in basketball, might leave at the end of the year, and it doesn't always go well because it's happened here a couple of times. And yet the Cavs made the finals in one of those years in what was a very weak Eastern Conference with LeBron. But how do you expect this team to be able to navigate that situation? Because you mentioned added pressure, and that, I think, from an outsider's perspective, very clearly is there with that team. But do you think this is going to be something that serves as sort of a distraction throughout the year for the roster?
No, I think they're locked in. I think Giannis himself does a really good job of setting that tone in the locker room. Like he mentioned, like, I'm here. He made it clear to his teammates, I'm committed. Let's go out here and get it. Like, we're trying to get better every single day. And I think for this particular roster of a lot of guys who have chips on their shoulder, it's a lot of younger guys too who are going to be put into bigger opportunities, bigger roles than what they might have experienced before in their playing career. So it's a lot of guys, I think, who are really anxious for the opportunity and excited about it. It's a team that believes in themselves. They can see the changes from the guys who were here last year and are still here this year, from your Gary Trent Jr.'s to Ryan Rollins, Kevin Porter Jr., some of the newer guys that joined the team that are still here. Even they're saying like it's a sharp difference seeing how this team is playing right now than what we had last year. Hearing from the older players, Bobby Portis, Giannis, just saying like, man, we are playing really fast. It's young, it's athletic, and we can see that difference very clearly. And it feels like a team that's ready to lock in and surprise some people because they hear everything going around how people project the Bucks to do. And this is a team with a lot of confidence in what they can do in themselves. And I think that they're ready to go out there and try to prove some people wrong.
This offseason, everyone expected that there would be a lot of noise around Giannis, and obviously nothing happened. At least people outside of Milwaukee. I don't know that people inside of Milwaukee necessarily felt that. But nobody, I think Bucks fans included, felt that the Bucks were going to be a major player in free agency this year. Well, it turns out that they decided to waive and stretch Damian Lillard and then sign Myles Turner to a pretty big contract. What has that integration process for Turner been so far throughout training camp and the preseason for the Bucks?
He has been a voice that the Bucks have needed because he is coming from a particular play style. He only knows how to really play the way he knows how to play. And a lot of those aspects are things that the Bucks want to carry over because the Pacers feel like one of the poster children in the league of like, this is how we're trying to play going forward. Them and the Thunder, you're trying to emulate some of the aspects you saw. And Myles Turner has been very vocal. He comes into this team as an instant vet for the most part because he's one of the older players now. Him, Giannis, Bobby Portis, all around the same age. You have Taurean Prince, a little bit older as well at the Nasses, who's a very, very deep rotational player for the team. But when looking at guys in the rotation and like the vets there, it's Myles is one of them. And his voice has been carrying a lot of weight. He's been encouraging the ball movement, make sure it doesn't stick. And also just how much movement you get from Myles Turner off ball is so different than what the Bucks had previously with Brook Lopez. He's comfortable in the corner. And it's not to say that Brook Lopez was bad in the corner. It's just that he didn't end up in the corners too often. But Myles Turner can do that for you. And defensively, he has shown he can play up to the level on pick and rolls, which the Bucks hadn't had before with Brook Lopez. He helps to modernize the game on both sides of the ball for the Bucks, being a little bit of a more mobile big than what the Bucks have had in years past with Brook Lopez there. So he's been really good. He's also been really embracing himself into the city at Brewers games throughout the playoff run, going apple picking, doing all the things in the community to try to really ingrain himself there. So on and off court, Myles Turner's been hitting all the right notes so far.
Well, we will have to find out where his favorite cheese curds are from because I'm sure he already has a place if he's been there for so many months. And you mentioned the team playing faster, and the Bucks, by saying that, I think they become like the 5,000th team in the NBA to say we want to play faster at the start of the season because I think all 30 head coaches or players on all 30 teams said that this preseason because it happens every single year. Do you expect that to be something that sticks with them? Like, do you think that this is a team that you're going to see take a jump in pace from where they were last year?
I do. I truly do. With the Bucks moving from Brook Lopez, who I think was still really good for the Bucks, just a little bit slower footer, and teams understood to bring him out the perimeter to exploit him. Without a Damian Lillard, who plays at his own pace. He's a half-court player. He's going to slow it down. Even prior to the trade deadline, Chris Middleton, another player that likes to play at his own pace. And it's normally a slower one because they like to get into the half-court offense. You take those three guys out of the equation now, and you're putting the ball in Giannis's hands as more of an initiator for the offense, point Giannis, so to speak. And they're really emphasizing getting out there and running quick shots. Like throughout preseason, you saw possessions where they're getting a 3 up and it's only like 19 seconds on the shot clock still at this point, and they have gotten a shot that they're very comfortable with up. You even see the defensive intensity ramped up for this Milwaukee Bucks team where they're pressuring more full court when Ryan Rounds is in the game. You're seeing guys picking up half court at the very least. So that pressure and the speed that they're playing at, I think that's going to translate big time into the regular season for them. And they all seem to be bought in. At least, it's still early season started, but everyone seems very, very bought into the idea of that we need to move the ball, find the best shots. And the Bucks want to be a team to get up more threes. Like last season, they were a team that was number 1 in efficiency, 3-point rate. But when it comes to the amount of threes they got up, they were like 18th in the NBA, and they want to be top 5 with their efficiency. So they know they need to also create more possessions and continue to move faster. So I think it's going to really translate into the regular season that you see the Bucks play at a faster pace than what you saw in years past.
That is always an interesting thing to me to track at the start of the season, because it is something that just about every team wants to do. I think the Bucks are a team that is built to have that sort of jump, especially when you talk about Brook Lopez no longer being there, who I think maybe might be one of like the 5 slowest guys in basketball, just does not have the foot speed that Myles Turner certainly does. And I want to wrap with this. I'm going to leave this very open-ended. It's a 2-parter because, of course, I'm going to finish with a 2-part question, but best case scenario for the Bucks this season is blank, and worst case scenario for the Bucks this season is blank.
I think best case scenario for the Bucks would be finishing like 3rd or so in the East. I think for them to get any higher than 3rd, there would be some things that to go wrong. Some teams ahead of them. So I would say probably like 3rd is probably like a ceiling for this Bucks team. And I could see them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals if everything aligns in that way. Worst case for the Bucks, if anything happens to Giannis, all bets are off, because this team is built so uniquely around Giannis to maximize what he can do, but also have Giannis maximize what everyone else around him does, even Myles Turner. For all of the shortcomings that Brook Lopez might have for foot speed, availability was not one of his weak points. So if they have any, it's a delicate balance, I think, in Milwaukee. So I think worst case, they could be a team fighting for the play-in. And I've been saying in my head, I think they end up falling in between that 4 to 6 range in the East and going from there. But it's a Bucks team that's been put out the first round of the playoffs for the last few years now, and they're just trying to at least get out of the first round here.
Well, I do think they will be one of the more fascinating teams to watch, especially how the vibes are early on in the season. But Camille Davis, again, does a fantastic job covering the Bucks over at Locked On Bucks. If you want to learn more about what's going on in Milwaukee, that is the place for you to go. Camille, thank you so much for the time.
No problem.
Thank you again to Gavin, to Erik, to Camille for joining today's edition of this Locked On Cavs Whiparound episode. The season is finally here. I'm very excited to be watching the Cavs play basketball games that matter. They start on Wednesday in New York, and then, of course, Friday in Brooklyn, Sunday at home against Milwaukee. I will have you covered right here at Locked On Cavs after all 3 of those games and on the days in between them as well. So please make sure that wherever you are listening to this podcast, whether it be Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere else, click the subscribe button, leave a comment on YouTube, give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify or whatever podcast platform is your preferred one. That is the very best way you can help to grow this show. But thank you for making this show your first or maybe even second listen, because it's not coming first thing in the morning. But thank you for making this show a listen of yours today. And I will be back tomorrow talking about the season opening game between the Cavs and the Knicks right here on Locked On Cavs.